Is now a practitioner in family medicine in Montreal there. And he is, again, the world's leading author on glutathione. He's a former professor at McGill Medical School, where his specialty was emergency medicine. And he was trained at the University of Calgary, my hometown, and did his emergency medicine residency at the Emory University in Atlanta, Georgia, where he was chief resident. Dr. Gutman went on to as a distinguished career in Canada, where he was appointed undergraduate director and residency trainer, director of emergency medicine at the University of McGill. He has been an organizer, speaker at numerous national and international medical conferences. He has contributed very extensively to the training of thousands of doctors and students. He is the leading expert on glutathione and authored several best-selling books on this topic. Dr. Gutman is dedicated to bridging the gap between traditional and complementary medicine, and he's appeared frequently on television, radio, and digital media, and of course, discussing the role of glutathione in heart disease, and obviously featured extensively now at the HeartFit Clinic. You're leaders in heart health. And so I welcome Dr. Jimmy Gutman. So thank you very much for your opportunity today.
Diamond, thank you so much. This is great fun. And an interesting opportunity to really get people educated on a topic that is still bizarre to some people's ears. So thank you.
So I know we had talked a few times already, and it's we talked a few times. Just a reminder, please, if you guys can disable your microphones and videos there. That would be awesome. Thank you very much. And so what's happening is that, we talk about artery disease, and I always talk about these arteries are a muscle, not a pipe. And, I might actually share my screen to get started here. And when we talk about the arteries as a muscle, not a pipe, that's so important to understand, because most people think of these arteries like a plumbing problem, right? Where we see this and we look at the artery and we zoom in on this section of the artery, and this is what the subendothelium looks like inside the lining of the artery wall. And all this drama, and this is why antioxidants are so powerful, is to prevent the oxidative stress that happens to the artery wall. So just a quick lesson on that part of it. Here's the artery wall as I zoom in on it, and we look at these small particles and we think about cholesterol accumulating to this pipe, and you have a last piece of pizza and you end up with a heart attack. And it doesn't happen that way. So the first thing is something has to injure this lining of the skin. Then these small particles go into the lining of the artery wall, and that's where they undergo oxidative stress. And this is why antioxidants are so powerful. And then you get an immune response, and it goes through a bunch of biochemical reactions to become a plaque. And so this process of atherosclerosis is very important as it relates to when we talk about artery disease. So I'm going to let you kind of take the lead on this. And I talked about this in the webinar invite today, is just the ability to be able to talk about people as to what can you do to prevent and reverse heart disease. Well, this is one of the most antioxidants that we can do, and I'm going to let you dive into that talk and correct me on that side of things. So just a reminder for everyone, please, if you could mute yourself if you're on a microphone there, that would be great. And I'm going to let Dr. Gutman get through his talk. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Diamond. Those are really nice slides. I think they beat the hell out of most of mine. So, but I am going to just back up a little. I know that there is a very varied crowd listening today, and certainly when you make the recording available, I'm sure there's going to be everything from cardiologists to just your average person who's concerned about heart disease, who doesn't have much of a background in biochemistry or physiology or anatomy. So I'm going to do a little bit of some basic stuff first.
For that as well.
Okay. Do they always charge you for it?
Just a reminder, if you could just mute yourself if you're on there, please, that would be great.
Yeah, thanks for the mute request. It'll certainly help out. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to attempt to share the screen. So we're both going to disappear virtually, but there I am. Do you see that okay? Yeah. We're still hearing somebody in their kitchen, so I'm wondering if we can just try to click that little microphone icon and get yourself muted. Okay, that's much better. That's much better. All right, so as Diamond mentioned, I have done a lot of work on glutathione. This is my latest book, and I'm going to take advantage of this time to pitch where you can get more information on glutathione. Certainly, you will find it in that book over there. It's available on Amazon or at glutathione.org. But there's a lot of other stuff that you can access on my Facebook page, on my YouTube channel. Just a world of information on glutathione. So if you have some time and you have the inclination, you can go there and take a peek. So we're going to look at glutathione, of course, and we're certainly going to look and see how it relates to heart disease. But let's look at glutathione first. This is a little molecule that exists in every single cell of your body. Glutathione is already in your body, and without it, we would not survive a minute. And glutathione, in fact, it's quite fascinating, is inside every single living cell, not just in our body, but in the rest of the animal kingdom, in the plant kingdom, and even when we look at microflora. Glutathione is key to life. And although for some of you, you've heard of glutathione, but many of you have not. But given the wealth of scientific information that's out there now on glutathione, there's over 160,000 medical and scientific articles on glutathione in well-recognized journals. Probably the best place where anybody wants to do any deep dive into research is a site called PubMed.gov. Every researcher, every scientist, I visit PubMed multiple times during the day. And so you're going to find a wealth of information on glutathione, but more specifically, if you go and you want to look at original research on different topics, you punch in keywords. And if you punch in glutathione and cardiology, you get over 1,000 articles. Cardiac, the word cardiac will bring you almost 9,000. And all of these other things that we're going to be talking about tonight, you won't have the time to read all 20,000 articles, I guarantee you, but this is very, very well-established research and continues to blossom every month of every year. So we're going to be talking about glutathione. We're going to be finding out a lot about glutathione, but if you're going to remember one slide tonight, it's this very simple slide over here. Despite what you're finding out online or hearing in advertisements, you can't eat glutathione and expect it to raise the glutathione levels in your cells. You can't eat, you can eat glutathione, but it isn't going to do much. Glutathione already exists in your body, and it's made by your cells. So the best way to raise glutathione is to give your cells the building blocks, or what we call precursors, so your cell makes its own glutathione. This is the best way to raise glutathione. Can't eat it. And when we talk about these building blocks, these precursors, the two most effective is a drug called N-acetylcysteine, which people abbreviate as NAC, and specifically whey protein isolates that are prepared properly. And when I say prepared properly, they need to be undenatured. They need to be in the same configuration as you find them naturally, which rules out the vast majority of whey proteins that you're going to find at the health food store or at the gym. And when you go to, well, we're speaking to Canadians tonight, but just in case Americans get a replay of this lecture, Americans will recognize this PDR, Physician's Desk Reference, and almost every Canadian has seen the CPS. It's a book that sits on the desk of every single doctor and every single pharmacist that you know. And in there it lists all the ways, all the drugs that I can write a prescription for. And there are 2 glutathione precursors in there. One is N-acetylcysteine, and one is a whey protein isolate called Munical. Those are what shows up in the doctor's handbooks, or references, I should say. People talk a lot about intravenous glutathione. It does work. It's a very interesting approach, but again, requiring an intravenous has its own hazards, and it certainly carries a bit of an expense. Now, this is something that most people aren't aware of. Intravenous glutathione, especially in the doses that you might receive, might have a half-life of a minute or 2. At best, when you use large doses, it can hang around for about a half-life of 20 minutes. And so you wonder how much good over time this is going to do. I give you an example. There's some great videos online where they're using intravenous glutathione to treat Parkinson's. So you see this guy wheeled into a clinic because obviously he needs to be in a wheelchair. He receives some intravenous glutathione, and he gets up out of his chair and starts to walk around almost normally. Just fantastic, just fantastic. The problem is by the time he's back home, he's back in the wheelchair because intravenous glutathione just doesn't last that long. Now, if you go online and you look at other ways to raise glutathione, you're going to see patches, suppositories, creams, liposomal glutathione, and 100 other variations of glutathione. There's just not enough research for us to be able to say that this works. In fact, most of them, frankly, don't work. If you go to PubMed and you look up good papers, glutathione can be inhaled, it could be nebulized, it gets to the lung tissues for COPD and asthma. And there are some investigational drugs that are being looked at to raise glutathione as well. So don't be fooled. Don't get your medical information from a marketing website. So what does glutathione do? Okay, so we're getting a little bit more interesting. Think of the word idea. Glutathione, what a great idea. What does idea stand for? I stands for the immune system. D stands for detoxification. E stands for energy. And A stands for antioxidant. Let's look at these in turn, and we'll do it quickly. And again, you can look this up or go to my Facebook page, and lots of information there. I stands for the immune system. Glutathione is literally food or fuel for your immune system. People with low glutathione levels are going to be immunocompromised. People with optimized glutathione levels are going to stand a much better chance against threats to the immune system. D stands for detoxification. And I tell people that next to water, there's no more important substance in your body for detoxification. Cigarette smoke, automobile exhaust, pesticides, herbicides, heavy metals. And by no coincidence, the highest levels of glutathione in your body are to be found in your liver, which is, after all, your major organ of detoxification. E stands for energy. Gets a little bit trickier here, but we're looking at mitochondrial function. The mitochondria are these little power plants inside of your cells that produce energy. They absolutely require glutathione, otherwise they would literally burn up. And A, and this is the one most people know about glutathione. Glutathione is referred to as the master antioxidant. Now, why use a term like master? It sounds more like a marketing term. The reason why we use the term master antioxidant is because all of the known antioxidants could not function without the presence of glutathione. Glutathione recycles these antioxidants. Glutathione recharges these antioxidants. And you think of antioxidants like working like a series of gears in a clock. Well, a clock needs to have a spring. And so the spring that's driving the whole process of all antioxidants is the glutathione molecule. So with those 4 points, you probably understand 90% of what glutathione does. So let's nail this down a little tighter and look at glutathione in heart disease. Now, Diamond showed you a much nicer slide than this, but just to go through the terms again, so we have a reference point. You have an artery. There's an outside tough lining that protects it. It's kind of hard to cut an artery, but you can do it. Don't try. A middle layer, which is actually quite muscular, and it can contract these arteries. It can expand these arteries. And then you have this really thin lining here, this delicate lining called an endothelium. And here you see a bunch of plaque stuck in the endothelium. Now, Diamond alluded to people thinking of these arteries just getting plugged up with blood. That's a very, very basic understanding, but it paints a nice picture. But in reality, it's much more complicated. And here we see some of that damage and clot formation inside of a vessel, and that vessel closes, and you have a heart attack or a stroke, God forbid. And it is more complicated than that. And in this slide, you see that there's a really, really delicate lining, sometimes in certain places that are only about 1 cell thick. You'd imagine how fragile it is. And those of you who want to have an example of what 1 cell thick or a couple cells thick are, if you've ever, you peel an onion and you get the pieces of onion, the layers of the onion, and sometimes you could peel off this really thin, transparent sheet. Now, you're looking at a couple cells thick. Imagine how sensitive that is to damage. Let's get a little bit more into the damage. This is a very, very busy slide, so I've broken it down. Here's a nice, healthy artery, and you see, again, this inner layer here, the endothelium. And in the boxes on your right, we're going to look at how glutathione is involved. So we've got circulating fats, of course, most notorious of which is cholesterol. And these fats can get stuck onto this very sensitive endothelium. And if you look at it in a microscope, you can actually see what are called fatty streaks. These are streaks of cholesterol and other fats. Well, glutathione itself can lower cholesterol through an enzyme called cholesterol decarboxylase. After a while, these fatty streaks can become oxidized even more, and it causes an inflammatory response. And again, for the ones trained in this field, we're looking at cytokines and other inflammatory agents. Then it starts to get nasty here and inflamed. It attracts other biochemicals.
This is all happening inside the subendothelium, right? This is all happening inside the lining of the artery wall. Not people think it's happening where it's accumulating, and that's where the change has to happen in terms of people thinking that cholesterol accumulates to this pipe analogy, right? And so this is all happening inside that lining of the artery wall. Yeah.
Diamond, thank you for pointing that out. And I was going to get into that a little bit later on, but yes, that's very important. It's not just on the inner surface. As inflammation sets in and these inflammatory agents accumulate, they sneak through that very sensitive layer, the endothelium, and start to affect the supporting tissue under it as well. So you're absolutely right, Diamond. You're absolutely right. I think you missed your calling. So glutathione reduces the oxidation of these fats and then blunts the inflammatory response, which in this case is a good thing. After a while, and as this gets deeper into beneath the endothelium, if things get bad enough, you start to attract other agents like platelets, which will cause things to clot, and glutathione has the effect of stabilizing platelets. And further down the road, if you keep on smoking or eating hamburgers for every meal and other substances like minerals like calcium get tied up into this whole mess, and you start to develop a real thick, hard plaque. And we can see this even on a plain X-ray on somebody with serious atherosclerosis. We can see this white strip following the outline of your aorta. So really ugly. So just to give you the most important role that glutathione plays over here, these circulating fats, when they become oxidized, it renders them biochemically stickier. And this ends up attracted to the endothelial linings and eventually underneath the endothelium, subendothelial area, and sets off a cascade of biochemical events that form plaque and hardening of the arteries and narrowing of the arteries. That's the really basic explanation. And the substance that stops this initial process of an ongoing process of oxidation is glutathione, mostly in the form of glutathione peroxidase, which is a glutathione enzyme, probably the most active glutathione enzyme we have. So when we look at plaque, and this is really scary. I'm sorry, I missed the reference. This is really scary. We're looking here at the prevalence of plaque. So how often are you going to find plaque? And look at the age groups. The study stopped at 40 years old. So we look at kids. I'm sorry to sound patronizing, but I think at my age I'm allowed to. Kids 21 to 25 years old. A 25-year-old, the incidence of plaque in their arteries is 50%. Guys, you got to change this. And Diamond, people should be coming to your clinic before they have problems, and you got to coach them about how to prevent that. So fortunately, 50% of the 25-year-olds may have plaque, but it's not big enough to bother them. But the process has started.
It's the process of atherosclerosis that starts early on in that adolescent years, even as you mentioned there. And so I think that the concern is that we have I just saw a patient today, and she had a heart attack, and she's 43 years old.
Right.
And it's not SCAD, to be precise, to those people on there, but it was an actual full-blown STEMI, which is a ST elevation MI. She had this heart attack and a stent, and the point I'm trying to make with that is that the plaque rupturing is the biggest concern. And this is where I think your talk comes into play really important, is that how can we prevent that plaque from rupturing? Because I would rather see people, we get patients all over the board, from in their 30s to preventing, to people in their 40s starting to have heart disease, to in the middle of the road, I say is 55-ish. But then we get 75, 80-year-olds that have stabilized plaques, and now we're trying to grow arteries around it because they're getting angina or some symptoms to that effect. This is where glutathione comes into play, and obviously our treatments and what we do in our clinic is very important. So, but yeah.
You're ahead of the curve, my friend. If we look at studies specifically on the endothelial cells, this is, again, a rather complicated figure here. But what's going on is that if you expose these cells to glutathione, you'll see that there's less injury compared to the control, and clearly higher glutathione levels. And here's a drug called OTC, which is another glutathione precursor, kind of still in the research phase. Again, you decrease the injury. And BSO is another drug that will deplete glutathione. It will suck the glutathione out of cells. And when you do that, see how much more injury there is. So that is kind of a benchtop study looking at cell cultures. But when we take it to the real world, we see that reflected. Here is a study on metabolic syndrome. And for those of you who don't know what metabolic syndrome is, it's a very common combination of signs and symptoms being high blood pressure, high blood sugar, high cholesterol, and a kind of apple-shaped abdomen. It's in epidemic proportions. In Canada, certainly more in the United States, and even more in Mexico. And when we look at glutathione, and remember, in this case, you're looking at the most important enzyme of glutathione, glutathione peroxidase, we see that far lower in people with metabolic syndrome. If we look at hypertension, this is an article I read a couple of years ago. The authors were literally begging the medical research community to do more studies to establish glutathione as a potentially effective means to address high blood pressure or hypertension. And just the amount of references that they cited was huge. Here, some of you may have heard of homocysteine. Homocysteine is a molecule that is considered a risk factor for cardiac disease or cardiovascular disease. And they were looking at middle-aged people with what's called essential hypertension, which I don't think it's essential is a kind of a con. It means we don't know why they have hypertension, but if I think we're going to know why in a couple of years, and many people have their ideas. But these essential hypertensive patients, these high blood pressure patients, have both elevated homocysteine and lowered glutathione levels, and both increasing with the amount of high blood pressure. So it's correlated. High blood pressure, the higher it goes, the worse your glutathione levels are, and the higher your homocysteine may be. We can't talk about cardiovascular disease without talking about diabetes. There are two things that get diabetics into big trouble. Infectious disease. Diabetics need to be considered by definition as being immunocompromised, and more often toe infections, skin infections, bladder infections, pneumonia. But the big one is the effect that diabetes has on their vascular system and their microvascular system. They have impaired circulation. And one of the reasons why they have impaired circulation is because diabetics, the nature of the diabetes, leaves them in a high state of oxidative stress. In other words, they have much more oxidation going on than a non-diabetic. And here again, we go back to cell cultures in the laboratory, and when we expose these sensitive cells to sugar, there's a lot of damage. When we add glutathione to it, the green box here, there's much less damage. If we expose them, the black box, to sugar and mannitol, which is another type of sugar, huge amount of damage. And when we add glutathione, the blue box, much less damage. And let's go on to, or actually, let's go back to younger people. And I wonder if this applies to that young woman you were talking about, Diamond. Here's a study that was looking specifically at younger people with premature coronary artery disease. And they found, again, that these patients, it'll be interesting for you to follow up with some tests, these patients had higher levels of oxidative stress and lower levels of glutathione. Very clear.
And just to be clear, like, I mean, we're always making glutathione in our body, right? And so it's just that they're not able to make enough. And so, especially when you have that oxidative stress into the artery wall, this is why you need a little bit more. And so, and keep those levels nice and elevated so it can be that master antioxidant that it's supposed to be.
You see, you've got exactly the right idea of really focusing just as much on prevention and on treatment. I'm a doctor, so I'm allowed knocking conventional medicine. We're just really, really good at taking care of acute problems. Preventing them, not so much. And in this study, let me go on to the next study. Sorry. In this study, this was a large study done in Japan, and they concluded, this is way back in 2004, that when you measure glutathione levels and you look at coronary artery disease, because there's such a strong correlation, that perhaps we should be screening people by measuring their glutathione levels to determine whether they were at high risk for a cardiovascular event. Now, this would have happened. Remember, this study is 2004. This would have happened, but the problem is measuring glutathione levels accurately is difficult and expensive to do. So, but it will come. It will come. So just to summary, because I think I've used up over half an hour already. Glutathione is going to cut down the amount of oxidation on your circulating fats, and in certain instances could even decrease the amount of circulating fats, although that's a much more minor effect. It's important to keep the circulating fats like cholesterol from oxidizing and doing all the damage that you and I have described. So if Diamond's got a cholesterol level of 5 and I've got a cholesterol level of 5, but I have much more oxidative stress, a lot more free radicals, I'm at far higher risk. It acts at the endothelial and subendothelial level to prevent damage, and I'll take you back to that complicated series of slides. Stabilizes platelets, potentially can lower hypertension. Again, it's a complicated biochemical phenomenon that involves nitric oxide, and I just don't want to get into that tonight because we'll be here forever, and you guys will end up going to sleep early tonight. And it really is very effective at minimizing inflammatory cytokines and the whole inflammatory process around the plaque, preventing plaque buildup, tightening and narrowing or occlusion of vessels, and even the vessels rupturing. So I think it's safe to say that glutathione levels can be both predictive of cardiovascular disease, including stroke, in addition to be potentially therapeutic intervention. So thank you very much, and I'm going to see if I can give you back the screen. There we go.
Excellent. Well, anyway, thank you so much for obviously a great talk of what's going on there, but I've got a few questions here, but I'm going to let the audience ask any questions that you have. If you could use the chat there, that would be really great. But I know there was a question here. It says, how does one keep their glutathione levels high? So maybe what are some natural ways that we can increase glutathione in our body? And then we'll get into, I know you already addressed some of the precursors, and I'll get into that in a moment here. So
yeah. So was it Edie that asked that question?
I believe it was Aaron that asked that question.
Okay.
Yeah.
So Aaron, I don't know how old you are. I'm a pretty old guy. But I know that my grandparents probably had to spend a lot less time worrying about their glutathione levels. And not only was oxidative stress and these kind of challenges with pollution and even mental stress, which can lower glutathione, maybe lower, but they had access to fresh produce. And there are certainly foods that will deliver glutathione precursors, but let's take a look. One of those is eggs, but it needs to be raw eggs, because when you heat these protein precursors up, they start to lose their ability to raise glutathione. So eating raw eggs carries some risks. You can get pretty sick doing that.
I remember Rocky in that setup where he's trying to do that part of it. So, yeah. Anyway,
yeah, I was waiting for Rocky to develop cramps and diarrhea in the ring after he ate those raw eggs. Don't do it. Here in Quebec, when we test eggs for bacterial with bacterial culture, full 30% of them test positive for salmonella. So don't do it. Raw vegetables, in particular, cruciferous vegetables like broccoli. When grandmother used to say broccoli is good for you. Now we know why, because broccoli contains a good amount of glutathione precursors, but it's got to be raw. Again, you heat it up and it loses its precursor ability. Let's see. Yeah, fish and meat. Guess what? They got to be raw. So if you have your steak and still blue on the inside, you're going to get some glutathione precursors. But Diamond will tell you he doesn't want you eating raw steaks, and certainly not steaks on a regular basis. You could be eating sushi, but if you eat sushi 3 times a day, you're probably going to go broke. The best source of glutathione precursors in mother's milk, and go try to find that. You got it for a couple of months when you're born, but that's it. And milk, but again, milk has to be raw, and
this
drinking.
is where cholesterol comes into play as well, like when you talk about that, right? So
yes, but raw milk, straight out of the cow. First of all, I don't think it's legal in either Alberta or BC, unless you're friends with a farmer. But drinking raw milk, again, carries a hazard, infectious disease, and many of us, and the darker skinned we are, and the further south we go, the more likely it is that you're lactose intolerant. So drinking raw milk, most people won't or can't. So we're limited, and when we go to the grocery store, Diamond, don't think that the potatoes you put on your kid's plate now is at all similar to the one that my mom put gave me when I was a kid. And the nutritional value of foods is declined as we breed them to be bigger, tougher, brighter, more beautiful, taste like nothing.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think it's important. I know you talk about the supplementation then, and I know you have that slide. I got a private message about that. is just that with that in play, we know that there are precursors because your body has the ability to make glutathione.
Yep.
So I know you already addressed it, so I'll just bring that slide up again, is NAC and isolate whey protein. And I know the company, sorry, I'm losing my
Immunotech.
Immunotech, their Immunical, their product is actually in the CPS. There's the one that's the most researched on that side of things. And so if you're looking for that information, I can send that to everybody after the call today.
That would be good.
Yeah.
So I'm sorry, Diamond. I just was trying to not to do marketing again because it's always suspect, and I do have to have a disclaimer. I've been working with this McGill-based research group for 26 years now. And so what we do is we make a product called Immunical, which has been subject to actually 40 years of research with, I don't know, 80 plus papers. And so this is very important for us because there are other whey proteins out there, but you need to understand that the majority of these wheys are side products of the dairy industry, and so they've already been pasteurized and heated, and they've lost the magic.
Yeah, and I know you can. I mean, gosh, you can. You talked about IV glutathione and the half-life of that stays in your body because you're not making that on your own, and so if you take it as a supplement, I mean, you can Google. There's glutathione all over the place. I always like to do this because I've been involved with glutathione for many years as well. I'm not to the level that you have, but just in terms of the knowledge behind what it does. I think I posted a video when I got involved or first knew about it, and you can go on our YouTube channel. I think it was like almost 10 years ago, I would say.
Oh, good for you. Good for you.
So I know the importance of glutathione. I've always known the importance of glutathione, but it's always important to understand where the source of those raw materials are from, and then liposomal versus oral company, like the raw material, where the source of those raw materials are very important, because a lot of the poor materials don't go through the digestive tract. And I'll say that just because to me, it doesn't matter where you buy it from, but it's important to get the best. And so understand that the molecule glutathione, it doesn't actually go through the digestive tract, through the digestive system very well. So it's important on how you deliver that, and not just go on the internet or Amazon and buy hey, glutathione, great. Diamond told me glutathione's great. Be careful of that, because you have to be understanding as to what is where the raw materials are sourced from and all that part of it. And you want to stick to a pharmaceutical grade kind of aspect of things. And this is why, there are other options out there, and I can go through them all at a later time, but the one that's been researched the best and the most is, of course, the Immunical there with the whey protein and the precursors to then allow your body to produce more glutathione where it can naturally do that. So those are the important things that, I can maybe talk to that, because to me, I have no disclosure. I don't make, it doesn't matter where you buy glutathione. I just want you to get as our patient population, the best one that you can get is really, this is why you use someone like ourselves to make sure, okay, where can I get the best one? Where are all my options?
Right.
And so, can you swallow a shake every morning, or did you want to take it as a pill, or do you want to take it as an IV, and that gets expensive every day? So those are all the kind of options that there are a lot out there, and I know a lot of more companies are coming out with options there. So
for sure. But again, 160,000 articles. If you look at the clinical use, 99% of them are going to tell you that you can't eat glutathione in any form, because the human digestive tract uniquely is high in an enzyme called gamma glutamyltransferase, which absolutely destroys glutathione. There are a couple of papers that show that oral glutathione can be ingested and they work. Interestingly enough, there's one big one on just straight up glutathione and another big one on liposomal glutathione. curiously, they're both written by the same author. So the same guy that said you can eat glutathione said you can eat liposomal glutathione. But I'm going to shock you now, Diamond. I'm going to shock you. You talk about pharmaceutical grade and where the glutathione comes from.
Good.
So here we go.
That's why we have you here.
Yeah. Where does the glutathione that's used in intravenous's and used in oral glutathione and used liposomal glutathione, where does it come from? Where does it come from? It actually is a 100% genetically modified substance. I'm not even going to say whether GMO is good or GMO is bad, but you need to know this. What is done is we will use either a type of fungus, a yeast, or we will use a type of bacteria. Most of this is done on the basis of yeast. And these yeast will either be exposed to radiation or otherwise treated to increase their ability to manufacture glutathione. And there are other even more bizarre mechanisms where you can cross E. coli, and I forgot whether it was a streptococcus, cross these two bacteria and develop clones of bacteria that manufacture glutathione. So the glutathione that's being used in intravenous's or an oral glutathione or any other glutathione, this is not human glutathione. This is glutathione that comes from microorganisms that have been stamped on.
And that's the beauty of this antioxidant is your body makes it. So you just got to give
Yes.
the environment for your body to produce that.
Yes.
That's where
Yes.
The precursors, you know, there are different levels of, I know in your book, which I have in front of me here, of course, and it is you have a great chart to show kind of the benefits of liposomal versus, you know, ingested glutathione to IV glutathione to precursors and then whey isolates. And so you talk about that part of it and you show, okay, well, here's the research. I mean, here's the data and this is what it's showing. And you're right. At the end of the day, I think it's important that you just have to give your body an environment to produce more glutathione.
Yes. 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 And talk
That's the
about
best.
natural.
That's the
That's
best
natural.
way. It's natural. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, ideally, Diamond, you and I would be in British Columbia, but in a really nice place in British Columbia, up near a mountain and some pastures. We, you know, have our own cows and grow our own plants, and we'd probably do pretty good. But who lives like that?
Yeah. I have a couple more questions here before I take you away there. One of them was with erectile dysfunction. I know erectile dysfunction is something that you talked about even in your book there as well, but where is glutathione and the role of that? And I'm gonna probe something a little bit more out of you and talk about where the role of nitric oxide plays with the use of glutathione, which is where nitrates come from. And I'm going to get a little bit more technical. That's where the source of Viagra comes from, or Cialis. Those are all nitrate type of like products, which was actually used initially for angina. And we noticed that there was side benefits from it. So can you comment on that part of it?
Yeah. So this is hugely complicated. And
I know it's complicated.
nitric oxide. You know, every time I think I understand nitric oxide, I run into another paper and I feel like I need to start from scratch. But nitric oxide has usually the effect of vasodilation. So in other words, you raise your nitric oxide and that muscular wall that we looked at in the artery relaxes. And as it relaxes, the tube gets bigger and more blood and oxygen and nutrients get through. And so Viagra is a perfect example because Viagra acts as a precursor for nitric oxide. And it's a very interesting story, Viagra. You probably know this, but for people out there, I guess you can call it a cute story. The researchers were trying to find another antihypertensive drug. And they started giving Viagra to clinical trials. It worked in animals. And of course, the older you are, the more likely it is that you have hypertension. So the enrollment of patients into the trial generally tend to be older. And the men, these older guys, were taking this experimental drug to lower their blood pressure, were coming back and saying, I surprised my wife last night.
Yeah.
And so, pharmaceutical companies recognizing an opportunity. So, okay, well, let's not pursue this drug as a drug for high blood pressure. Let's pursue this for erectile dysfunction. So, but if it works on erections, it works by widening the arteries by vasodilatation. And so when we look at vasodilatation, which is a good thing when you're controlling blood pressure, and it's a good thing when you're addressing people with narrowed arteries, as in atherosclerosis, becomes more relevant. And there's an intimate role that glutathione plays with these nitric substances, what are called nitrosoglutathiones. And it's all tied up with a similar mechanism, that being oxidative stress. And the two of them combined, in particular, tend to have very effective benefits on plaque-laden or hardened arteries.
Mhm. I got 2 more questions here for you, and if anyone else has any more, again, you can use the chat there as well. One of them was just in terms of the role of glutathione with heavy metal toxicity. So a lot of our patient population have the amalgam fillings or the silver lining fillings, or they've been exposed to heavy metal toxicity. Can you just quickly comment, because I know you talked about the liver and the role of glutathione and how the liver is detoxing. So maybe just quickly comment on that part and the role of glutathione.
That is a major function of glutathione as a detoxifier. And glutathione detoxifies by several different mechanisms. One is by the reduction of oxidative stress, which many of these toxins, this is how they assert their toxicity. It's by raising. But there's another mechanism by which glutathione works, and by actually conjugating, by attaching, the glutathione will attach itself to a heavy metal like lead or mercury or cadmium, and the two together become water soluble, and so it's much easier for you to eliminate. And we're talking about our natural detoxification of heavy metals. Glutathione is the major system by which we get rid of heavy metals. And it's very easy to test. Now the technology is there where you can buy urine dipsticks to test for different heavy metals.
Yeah.
For example, if you're worried about mercury, you can do it before and after. Check the mercury levels in your urine and then raise your glutathione's, and you will see a difference. So critically important there.
Excellent. Well, I've got one last question here before.
Can I just go back and use a word? People usually refer to one molecule binding another heavy metal to get rid of it as chelation. So this can be considered oral chelation therapy.
Excellent. Yeah. And so, and you alluded to that already, with the idea slide that you had in the beginning, and detoxification is very important because we're exposed to a lot of environmental toxins all day long, and your body's always fighting this, and this is why your liver is always in high demand. And so when you have extra things such as heavy metal toxicity or the dental amalgam fillings or something like that, it's going in overdrive, and that's where you require more glutathione production to go to battle that way and chelate or take away those heavy metal toxicities.
Yes,
That's
yes.
super important. And I know go on,
sorry. So
go on.
The term oxidative stress, it's a very easy definition.
Mhm.
Is when the oxidation, products of oxidation, free radicals, start to outbalance the amount of antioxidants.
Yeah.
So you end up with a shift of more free radicals, less antioxidants, and that's oxidative stress. And that's what these pollutants and other factors do.
Of course, yeah. There was a question as to how do you know, can you check levels of glutathione? I know we do this in our clinic as well, but yeah, is it something that you recommend? Yeah.
Wow.
I know you can't check it in usually the public labs and stuff like that.
No. It's tricky to do. I know that there are tests available, and I know you can go online and get tests for $40 or whatever. It's really difficult, expensive, and complicated. When we do our studies and we measure glutathione, right now we've kind of thrown our hands up in the air, and we take our samples. We send them to Emory University, which is the best place to do them. That's really expensive.
Mm-hmm.
And then the question is, what are you measuring? Are you measuring total glutathione? Are you measuring oxidized glutathione? Are you measuring reduced glutathione? Are you measuring the ratio between oxidized and reduced glutathione, which is the best way, by the way?
Yeah.
And where are you measuring it? Is it whole blood glutathione? Is it red blood cell glutathione? Is it plasma glutathione? When we do it, we like to measure what's called lymphocytic glutathione. That's the glutathione levels in the white blood cells. After all, the white blood cells are going to be a reflection of the immune system.
Yeah.
So we draw the blood, we put it in centrifuge, spin it down, we extract out the white blood cells, we put them in a special solution so they can last the shipment to a good laboratory, and the laboratory has to be good. It's not an easy thing to do. So a really accurate glutathione level is difficult to do. You can get a rough idea with some of these other tests. Later you'll let me know what you're using, and be very, very curious to see.
Yeah, we use some intracellular testing as well and get into the white blood cells. So that's what we do in our
Wonderful.
clinics. Yeah.
Wonderful.
So we get some good ideas as to where the glutathione levels are. And of course, you're always making glutathione. So is it a little bit lower than where you should be? Or do you need even more better levels just because of the situation that's going on with oxidative stress or removing detoxification or whatever it might be? But there's this is going to be my only personal question. I think a lot of people asked some good questions, but so can you comment a little bit on hemolytic anemia and the role of glutathione that way in terms of anyway, I'll let you comment on that part of it.
Well, again, there are different types of hemolytic anemia. But damn, Diamond, you've given me another chance to plug my book.
I know. I've got it right here. So for those of you that don't see that really well, it's
right.
It's there. So
there's a whole chapter on anemia, and yes, we touch upon hemolytic anemia and other anemias. And again, of course, the culprit is oxidative stress. I mean, and it's very interesting because if we look at red blood cells, it's one of the few cells that we have in our body that the glutathione isn't actually inside of the cell. Glutathione is actually on the surface of the red blood cells. So it's strange. And so when we look at hemolytic anemia, we look at something like sickle cell anemia. Again, it's all about oxidative stress and the buckling or breakdown of the membrane around the red blood cell. So what made you bring up that specific problem?
So, I mean, I got a lot of things I could share with you, and this is not the right venue for that part of it. But just the condition that I have is G6PD, which is glucose 6-phosphate deficiency. And I know the hemolytic anemia is actually quite common with a lot of other people not necessarily having that condition. So for those of you who don't know, that's a condition where you don't make glucose 6-phosphate deficiency. Therefore, aspirin is something I can't take, or actually, there's a bunch of foods that I don't take in terms of putting me into hemolytic anemia, which can be happening with people on a generalized term. So just the role of glutathione is so important with that part of it as well. And so And just as a personal note, I also wanted to share, just in terms of reducing lipoprotein A, which is an atherogenic particle that goes inside the artery wall, I've had good success taking glutathione and lowering that number in combination with another supplement that we had carry in our clinic. So glutathione becomes a very, very important master antioxidant in terms of preventing and reversing cardiovascular disease. And this is why, obviously brought the leading researcher on that side of things with you guys today, so that you guys can have important stuff on that side of things. So,
I mean, I have to say, I am so impressed with your level of understanding of this topic. I speak to tons of people. I speak to tons of physicians.
Yeah,
you're extraordinary, just extraordinary.
Well, thank you very much, and it's a passion of mine to help all of you out there, to really focus on preventing and reversing heart disease, and bring in world-renowned people to talk about glutathione, which is a super important thing. And I think you do a better job than what I can do. And it's something that's super important. And I think it's important to have that as a supplement or a master antioxidant, or ways to make sure it's keeping the levels up to par, or even better, especially if you have or are prone to oxidative stress. And so, obviously, if you're out there and you have diabetes and you have high cholesterol, and cholesterol is not the culprit. We already know that part of it from that side of things. So we know that cholesterol is not the cause of heart disease, and it bugs me when people talk to that part of it. It's those particles getting used up in a negative way that causes that issue. So those are the important things that has to happen from that end of it, and be able to prevent and reverse that cardiovascular disease. And so, diabetes, hypertension, cholesterol, if you have abnormal cholesterol. And then the other thing with understanding that if you have atherosclerosis or artery disease, when there are different types of heart diseases out there, even electrical imbalances and stuff like that. I know you addressed that in your book with that part of it. So glutathione becomes a very, very important molecule because of the idea that you went through in terms of helping with immunity and detoxification. And I'll let you finish the rest of them, because it's your book and your content. So, but I'll let you finish on the idea concept, and we'll when we're there. So
yeah. So I've enjoyed this very, very much, Diamond. If you were in my part of the world, I'd be referring people to you, but it's a bit of a long drive, especially with the cost of gas. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think I'll leave it out there. Thank you very much for all the nice comments there. I appreciate them. And I do plan on opening up clinics all across Canada. That is the plan, and eventually get in the US, but I'm only one person, so I definitely require the resources to be able to do that. So, but all in due time and all in due course. So excellent. Well, thank you very much, Dr. Jimmy Gutman, for your time today. I think your information is super valuable, and I thank you for and your time is very precious. And so thank you for taking the time out of your busy day to be with us today and talk about this, and talk about the important master antioxidants to preventing and reversing heart disease, which is super important. And we look forward to having further discussions on this part of it to help with that part of it. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
And thank you all out there for your time today. I know your time is valuable. I hope you found the information useful. And if you had any questions, comments, or observations, I welcome them. Obviously, you're all on our email contact list, and so you can always